You understand that correctly, yes.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay, and we never actually had original documents in our possession, so really we didn't know whether or not whether the documents we were dealing with were full, complete, and legal. We never saw originals of any document.
You never touched the original wet ink copy of anything?
Correct.
Go ahead, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. So as I learned more of what I was doing, I felt that McCarthy Holtis was using their employees to unduly enrich the banks to get back their properties. They would have someone pay on it for a few years. When they couldn't do it anymore, they'd foreclose on it and sell it again, and over again.
Was there ever any intent to help them remortgage and get a new loan?
No. We were told on multiple occasions to deny all first loan lots.
Do you remember who specifically told you that?
It was in a video conference with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac executives.
With Fannie Mae in a conference call?
Yes.
And Fannie Mae was where, on the West Coast or on the East Coast?
It was a video conference. Sorry.
Wow. But you don't remember the specific person in that video telling you to deny all first
loan loans.
Wow. Go ahead, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
And that's precisely why they picked the employees they did. Is no legal experience. If you could run a computer, you could work there. That was the only requirement.
If you could run a computer. So somebody that didn't even finish high school could work there?
Yes. To my knowledge.
So when you were hired, did they say, do you have a college degree? They just want to know if you could run a computer?
Correct.
That was the only standard?
Yes.
Wow. Did they give you any training on running their computers?
We're given extensive training on their computers and their systems, specific to them. But we were never instructed that it was improper to attach allonges to notes that weren't part of the original document.
Wow. And while you were there, did they tell you to dress nice or?
No. In fact, we were told just the opposite. Don't dress like lawyers or anything like that. Dress like regular people on the street. So
like you might be going to the beach to hang out for a while.
Exactly.
Wow.
So
I think we saw that today. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
That was pretty much my points.
So the chain of titles are fraudulent?
I believe so. In
your belief?
In my belief.
From what you were grabbing from different people's files and just podging them together?
What I was doing from different sources of digitized documents, mainly MERS, they were coming from all different.
And so you had access to MERS?
Yes.
Every day?
Yes.
Did you have a security code or anything to get into MERS?
Everyone had passwords to get onto the systems. You had different passwords for different systems.
So people could get into MERS who didn't even have a high school education, had no paralegal training?
Correct.
Did not know that they were doing is help commit a felony?
Correct. I didn't realize until after I actually read law and I read the DOJ settlement.
Did you do that on your own time?
No.
You did that at work?
Yeah, we were encouraged to read case law.
You were encouraged to read case law?
Yeah.
So you're kind of like learning as you commit the fraud, but you got used to doing your part of creating fraudulent documents while you're learning the law? Do I understand that right?
Yes.
And you've got to put out a minimum of 8 motions a day or lose your job?
Yes.
You sure?
Yes, I'm very sure. It caused me so much stress.
Okay, go ahead. I interrupted you. Finish reading what you wanted to say.
The quotas were so, for me personally, were so difficult to obtain that it caused me health problems and mental anguish.
Yeah. So you had personal damages from doing this. Was you recognizing the homeowners were also having personal damages.
Oh, yes.
Wow. Do you think Congress has an obligation to do something about this?
Yes.
How about the state legislature? Because we're in the state of California.
Yes, we do. And whether the banks like it or not, the law should be followed, not what is beneficial for the bank. It's the law. And when notes and deeds of trust are voided or mishandled, the law should prevail, not what's beneficial to the bank or what's easy for the judge.
Did anybody ever tell you while you were at work that don't worry about this little issue or don't worry about that because the judge that may hear this has stock in the bank? Did anybody ever say that?
I wasn't privy to
You didn't hear that?
No.
Did it ever occur to you, this might end up in front of a judge, but don't worry about it?
Towards the end of my time there, I was concerned that my paperwork would go before a judge and be questioned.
And you were using your own name or someone else's name when you put these documents together?
I don't know. That's just it. I don't know whether my name is connected with any of the paperwork that was in their systems. It should be, but once it went to the attorney, it should not have been. My name should not have been connected with the
Some
documents.
attorney should have put their name on.
Correct.
So the attorney gets a document that's been rammed together, he stamps his name on it, and your name shouldn't have even appeared. So no one would ever know
Right.
that this attorney doesn't even know what he's bringing into court.
Correct.
That explains why they look so stupid sometimes when Cindy Brown and others and Sherry Moody question them in front of the judge. That explains a lot. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing this interview. Is there anything else you want to say for this clip?
Just that I hope that I can help in some way, someone getting their home back.
I think you just did. I think you just helped a lot. I wish there were more whistleblowers like you, and we'll protect your identity until Congress subpoenas you to testify. I thank you very much on behalf of you and Billy Renee Powers and Faith Brashear and Sherry Moody and literally millions of homeowners that have become homeless people because of what you just described. And it's amazing to me because I rarely get to hear somebody like you from the inside. That building, they wouldn't let us in. I offered to ask them, can we come in and have coffee and sit down and talk? And no, they were not having it. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. And I thank you people at home and on YouTube for watching. You need to call your congressman.
The law should prevail, not what's beneficial to the bank or what's easy for the judge.
And see that something gets done. Call your state assemblyman, who you probably don't even know, or your state senator and say, this needs to stop. We need to fix this now. And some judges that have colluded, whether they're federal or state, need to be held accountable, i.e. prison time, for cooperating with crooked documents. On the face of them, they don't make sense. Anyway, that's my opinion. I'm just William Wagener for On Second Thought. Thanks for tuning in. Back to the studio. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a whistleblower. It's really a big deal. Do I have your permission to put this on television, YouTube, and other media?
If we get a pregnant from the government, what that means is it automatically closes down and it goes to a seal. And that seal is a seal of truth. And they actually put a stamp, the seal of truth, on it. So now we have a colonel who's now engaging us in...
Full bird colonel, by the way.
Full bird colonel. Going into an Article 3 tribunals at the Federal Claim Court, turning that into the ability for set-offs and offsets for the claiming of the namesake. Now, the namesake, as you're aware, is you, your name, to which they used as the creditor you are the actual person who went...
utility.
Yeah, the utility, the vessel, the commercial vessel, that was turned into a member bank, and they borrowed the money against your credit, and then tandem advanced on the deed of trust. And if you understand what the deed of trust is, for those who, it's actually in an IRS form. If you look at the bottom right-hand side of that deed of trust, that instrument is actually an IRS instrument. That is what's called a government election of action. That it allows them to use your signature for that registration. Now, when they were doing the MERS pass-through system, that is nothing but a registration system. Now, it is called the Trademark Underwriting Mortgage Electronic Registration System, which spells
Tumors.
tumors.
It's the cancer of our lives as far as stealing our lands, our estates, and our lives.
And it was willful and deliberate because pass-through REMICs are tax exempt.
Let's go around by quality loans. The Bratton sisters, Michael Rodriguez, and the 20 acres. So what we did was we all together planned this and made sure that we would be seen and heard, and obviously they don't like the truth.
No.
Over at McCarthy and Holthus.
That's why I have to talk about the sidewalk, because all that cognitive dissonance. You know?
Yes,
It's
yeah.
like they have to talk about something other than their thing in the room.
Right. They changed, and when I brought it back to the documents,
And we're not even in their doorway. We're not in their building. They could just see the agitation because you're putting a light on what's going on and how corrupt the system is.
Exactly.
It's designed for an elite ruling class that knows the political establishment will protect them.
This building behind us where the attorneys came out. Well, they wouldn't give us names. One said he was an attorney. The other was Owens, correct? And he said he was an attorney, but they did say something about this is where the documents are created. So anyhow, we've agreed to stay off their property because we hadn't planned on being anything but peaceful. We just wanted to know who was in charge of creating the documents that stole our home, and we didn't even have to ask, they told us. So they're creating the documents here. He did not agree that they're stealing our homes, but as all of us know, we've had our homes stolen. Exactly. So our goal through Powers versus Bank of New York Mellon at appeal and through Brashear versus United States at the Washington Court of Claims, Washington, D.C., our goal is for all 67 million dispossessed homeowners to be represented. We have hundreds of people that have sent in their documentation, hundreds, and Judge David O. Carter, by admission on the record, ordered all the interested party documentation to be destroyed.
The law should prevail, not what's beneficial to the bank or what's easy for the judge.
So that actually is being taken to task because that actually is a crime. You cannot destroy documents in a court like that, and I've had it on real good authority, and I'm very sad because I like Judge Carter. I really did. I thought he was going to do the right thing. So faith is going to continue where regarding the REMICs, which remember in our case we've proven that in order for them to do anything, now remember on the floor committee hearing they're trying to do away with the collateral. The requirement for collateral. Well, what they're not saying is that's the 100% cash collateral deposit that is required for any credit lending. And by the way, the other thing they forgot is they have no authority to lend to the people or the public at large.
Well, you can't lend your own credit. It's ultra-virus, bottom line. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are, I have pages of ultra-virus laws that I submitted as a written memorandum of laws that you list out, and I think it was like 5 pages long of
it was beautiful.
ultra-virus.
It was beautifully written. And remember, with each violation comes trillions of dollars of claims when per person, per woman, per man, per child, per grandmother, anyone harmed in these families have a right to claim, which is Form 95. And on our websites, on the disleague.com and on abolishthebankers.com, we have the information for you to send in your letters of support to these cases along with your claim forms for damages.
Okay, because the claim form is that they used you as a commercial vessel, okay? They proclaimed you missing in action.
Enjoy. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a beautiful day. Gosh, look at how nice to have the top down.
Okay, so basically when they set up these master pass-through trusts, all right, they are set up to do just that. They pass through. You have the originator of the REMIC, who is what is disclosed to you as the lender, who actually originates for the security which was never securitized per se, it was collateralized. So you never had an actual security instrument ever.
And let me interject. The collateral that is supposed to be held in these REMIC trusts is the collateral deposit of 100% cash. But what they're doing is they're using the situs as the collateral, not your property. You'll notice that what's listed in there is an address. That address is called a situs, and the situs is how MERS creates the identity theft and the fake MERS mortgages on the back side that they're laundering hundreds of times over, and billions and trillions of dollars that are being floated through these courts. And the other thing is the judges in the courts also have a conflict of interest, and so does this building, because MERS fake mortgages are on everything, and many of these components of the people have MERS mortgages. They have bought REOs. They've bought properties that have been stolen directly through their courts, and they live in them.
That's true. Yeah, the judge wanted my property. That's why I got beaten out of my home.
All of us are affected by the way, physically, mentally, emotionally. My husband's really sick, and we are all struggling because of these crimes. Because mentally, we're deprived of having a happy life.
Your house is
and
like,
your
house is like a family member, right? It's like
Yes.
it's like having a child with cancer.
Yes.
So your pursuit of happiness has been interfered with?
Yes, major. This is a big crime, treasonous crime
How many people
against
here
the
have been
banks.
hospitalized for damages from the banks? Had a stroke. Faith
Yeah.
has had a stroke. How many others here have had a stroke from the stress?
Near stroke, but I lost a lot of hair. My friends were so fearful in 2010, 2011. They were so fearful that something horrible was happening with me because I had lost, you could see my scalp. I mean, I look like Smeagol from Lord of the Rings. I was so ashamed to go.
No,
But this is it. That's the crime.
everyone is injured. Financial crimes against humanity. In December 2018, President Trump put out an executive order addressing that everything that's associated with someone doing financial crimes against humanity is to be seized. Now that's, when he said foreign, the banks are foreign. They're foreign entities. So what we see, and we know that, remember Citibank was shut down. Remember Citibank being shut down for a few days? Well, that wasn't by chance. That was by design.
What year was that?
2 months ago, 3 months ago, just recently. Then Chase was also warned that they'd be shut down.
The law should prevail, not what's beneficial to the bank or what's easy for the judge.
So what we had on the financial committee floor was all the bankers and the congressmen and women, and the one thing that they unequivocally answered very fast was when they were asked, do you believe the gold standard should be brought back? Each one of them, as fast as you could breathe, said no, 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 no. The only thing they all said quickly without second stepping, and even Brian Moynihan, who whispered through the whole thing, very loudly said no. To do is scare the bejeebies out of us, especially, and this is part also of what Faith has brought into the case.
Right, because you have to understand the tumors, because it is what it is a trademark system. That means when you look at your actual deed of trust, which we know is a government election of action, okay, it specifically says the borrower is all caps, and contract law is very specific. Contract law means that that is an entity or a corporation. Now, if you look at the actual trademark, the actual verbiage on the trademark or the mortgage electronic registration,
what's
that is
beneficial
what
to the
nations
bank
make,
or what's
and
easy
they
for the
specifically
judge.
state right in there that they are borrowing against the intellectual property, which is
Us.
so that trademark is also posted on the website, okay?
www.disleague.com and abolishthebankers.com. It's very important that you all recognize the urgency to get your documentation and information in, because we're sending evidence of crimes.
Can we send it to?
They're posted on the
They're posted
website.
on the website.
Remics, okay? They each have different pass-through remics. Remic 1, Remic 2, Remic 3. Your Remic 1, just the 3, is your pooled loans. Now these pooled loans, the way that the Remic was set up, it was set up only to hold one thing. It cannot hold both the deed and the note. That means it would exempt its tax-exempt status. But the thing is, when they created these pass-throughs, and when I was beta testing these pass-throughs, okay, it was specifically targeted through groups of people okay, to make sure that they were higher risk to emulate those triggered defaults that we know now are embedded on the deeds of trust themselves. Okay, so why it's worth trillions and trillions of dollars is because they are tax-exempt special purpose vehicle, and any player who goes without the proper authority for the foreclosure process through U.S. Treasury, and we cite all of these wonderful codes to which they violate, that means that they violated the tax-exempt status, which means per their own pooling and service agreements and prospectus, we can call into question the tax-exempt status, which means that every player is now due and liable for 115% plus back due penalties for violating that tax-exempt status.
And remember, Obdusky
which
has
is worth
made it,
trillions.
has affirmed that McCarthy and Holthus and other law firms, they're saying they're not debt collectors, but that's what all their letters say, but they are saying they're dealing in securities. So what does that mean McCarthy and Holthus is doing? They're using counterfeit securities to steal our homes under a deed of trust that no longer exists.
And no mortgage ever existed. They're foreclosing under mortgages is what they're doing. And there are no mortgages on these loans.
There's no loan. There's no loan. There's no student loan. There's no credit card debt. There's nothing. There's nothing but fake documentation.
And they did it to raid the Treasury. And that's why you have SB 25 and SB 26 on the ballot. What's actually happening around you. Okay, the FBI just got deployed back to New York and Washington, D.C. Okay, there's some major things that are happening out there right now that are ready to go down. So expect to see arrest, expect to see indictments, okay? Expect to see...
Well, the good news is, think about this. All of the politicians have been involved. Okay, all of them. They all are, because they're all foreign entities once they take that oath. But think about this. If you're a criminal, what do we see them doing? They take plea deals. So when you have the biggest criminals in the country who know the crimes, what better way to save your own arse than to belly up?
Yeah, but he's got to get the gold standard back.
Yes, and
because
the banks unequivocally, what did they say?
No gold.
And what do we say to the gold standard? Yes. And what do we say to Glass-Steagall? Yes. And what do we say to McCarthy and Holthus? Stop stealing home! Stop stealing home! Stop stealing home! Stop stealing home! Woo!
The law should prevail, not what's beneficial to the bank or what's easy for the judge.
My neighbor lost his home. Many of you learned of my story. I was a successful realtor. I did loans. I did it all. I worked with this home, the building, when it was First American. I knew Mr. McCarthy and Mr. Holthus personally. I was part of it. And all of a sudden, one day in 2008, my neighbor at my beautiful property came by and with tears in his eyes said, "I lost my home today." And I said, "I saw the for sale sign down there. I'm sorry I didn't do anything about it." And I knew that when he lost his home, he was a pretty smart dude. So I said, "Tell me the story." He said, "I worked hard. We were given a free loan. We added the kitchen, we added the bath, and then when we were ready to sell, EMC, which is bought out by Chase, given to Chase, EMC owned it." And I said, "My God, you took $200,000 off my home," on the price he was being quoted at the courthouse steps. He said, "The bastard stole my home." And I said, "You cost me $200,000. Now,
Equity.
he looked at me and he stopped crying. And I said, "I'm sorry." That was my introduction. I couldn't tell that story for over a year. I would choke up. Why? I knew my next door neighbor in the other direction. We were on the other side at the mailbox. And I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "Oh, this thing that's gone on here has cost me $200,000 of my savings equity. The banks took my equity in my retirement fund. Neighbor A lost it on the foreclosure, 200. Neighbor B lost his 200, stolen from Wall Street.
And you lost.
And I lost at least that much." And I said, "Whoa, what am I going to do about this?" Being a good researcher, I started the process. All of you have started your own process. when you discover one thing, there's another turtle and another rock. I have evidence in 2009 from 6 executives from 6 different lenders telling me they weren't going to research any further. I had what I was going to get. I said, that's fantastic. What I learned is simply this. Wall Street had created, with the use of my loan, that I accepted an obligation, they created a bond security. Didn't tell me that. It was a secret lien.
And didn't tell you were the investor.
I didn't even know that. I still don't believe it, but
It's true.
I am what I am too.
Yeah, sure.
And so I look at it and I go, here's what they did. They took my signature on my loan paper and created electronic output from it because I don't see any brake trucks anywhere. Nobody's moving money anymore. And I said, whoa, this is a different game we're in. And that's when I uncovered the meaning of Wall Street interactive numbers, scroll numbers, and your loan number disappears. And it disappears through the process called MERS. MERS has access to 4 different portals. One is to bring the product in from lenders at the ground like we have here, me, others, and it's coming in and being repackaged in bulk to the next level, and it loses its identity.
It bypasses it completely into the securitization process like you're describing. It completely dissolves the note. Notes don't exist. That's why you had cases like Countrywide, was it Kemper? Or in Countrywide?
Kemp versus Kemp. Oh yeah.
Yeah, the one that was that the note never left the file.
Right.
One.
Kemp versus Country.
Yeah, that one. That is because they never left the, because they knew it went directly into collateralization. It was never securitized, which means that every loan across this nation, all they have to do is say, I rescind, because there was no consummation. They were all unilateral contracts.
The law should prevail, not what's beneficial to the bank or what's easy for the judge.
They presented 9-0.
9-0. Our Supreme Court in 2015 said, anybody can rescind at risk their obligation under TILA. And a lot of people just wrote and sent them in. Well, we didn't believe that, so we started collecting the data. And the proof that you could go and take it to a judge at any level and say, we tried to get it from Houthis, we tried to get it from Quality Loan, we tried to get it from Quality Loan Services, we tried to get it from Quality Loan Services Corp. You realize they're all the same company?
Yeah. Owner right there.
Now, when you look at it from that point of view, where does the game end?
It doesn't.
It never ends.
And derivatives?
Yeah.
Derivatives are what was it that Warren Buffett said? They're the bomb.
Yeah, they're bomb.
They're the bomb.
Package bomb.
Package bomb. So
Dirty bomb.
what all of this means is, from the inception, now the Deputy Attorney General out of LA said, Billy, you guys can quit chasing your tail, quit going down rabbit holes. It takes one document of fraud. It's a void. It doesn't exist. So all of us going into court, they, by design, these documents they're admittedly creating here, these documents are created to give an illusion under the color of law that they have a right to present securities dressed as a deed of trust that are empty and never existed. The trust is empty. There is nothing collateral. This is why we cannot let Wall Street bankers unilaterally say no to the gold standard and rid us of the demand. And
That's Renee Powers. That was yesterday, 25th of April. There were some... Pamela, where are you? This would be a good time for Pamela to come bouncing in here with her lively personality. But she's only available on YouTube. So the point of the California 18 is Camilla Harris, who now got promoted by the bank gangsters to another position she doesn't deserve, after doing a terrible job as Attorney General,
because the California came with her and brought hard evidence that the banks are engaged in a Ponzi scheme and massive fraud, that the clerks of some of the counties and the district attorneys and a big chunk of the Bar Association are all criminals. Kamala Harris was like, I hear no evil, I see no evil, and I will speak no evil. Just let them go on feloniously stealing people's homes. The whole money scheme is a Ponzi scheme. And one of the ways they're trying to support it is by stealing real assets and to hold it up. What they ought to do is what Iceland did. We need an Icelandic revolution. You know what they did in the little tiny nation? The little volcanic rock where people live and they call themselves Icelanders? They arrested the bankers, put them in jail. Of course, they had to throw out their entire parliament and elect a whole new parliament. They had a plebiscite. You know what a plebiscite is? A plebiscite is when you have a national vote and all the people get to vote. Do we throw out the whole government and put in a new one? And I would say that's exactly what America needs to do. We need to throw out all of the representatives, maybe not Rand Paul, U.S. Senator from Kentucky, but virtually all the rest, including Kamala Harris and the other fiendish ghoul from California in the U.S. Senate, all our congressmen, throw them out. Start with people who have never been in government, so they haven't had time to be corrupted yet. They will get corrupted after 5 or 6 years. Then we've got to throw them out again. That's why they had elections. But the elections are rigged, number one. And I brought you that guy many times, showing you where he's testifying to Congressman Conyers in Ohio State House, not in Washington, D.C., where apparently they ran out of hearing rooms because he was testifying that the vote machine that we use in Santa Barbara County, the vote scanning machine, put out by Diebold and Sequoia and similar type garbage machines, can flip the vote. So you vote one way, your vote counts the other way. So your vote has no integrity. The only vote that you can count on is when you're on a grand jury, which is like 17 to 25, or you're on a petite jury, and you look at it and you say, you know what, this Michael Jackson guy, he's innocent. All this rotten snake they call Mad Dog Sneddon, God burn his soul in hell where he belongs. I hope he has no peace. Forgive me, Jesus. The guy was just such a... One of these shows, before they take us off the air, I'm going to do a show just on how rotten Tom Sneddon and his family was. Not just him. He had relatives. Anyway, I'm not going to go there today. One of the things that I found really interesting is this guy, his name is Daniel Dyzak. D-Y-D-Z-A-K. Daniel came here on the show. Yeah, on this show, on Second Thought. And he's coming back soon. And he flat out says the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, the number one justice guy, is a thief. Ron George. Of course, he retired when the pressure started to build up because he had taken the funds. He somehow got Schwarzenegger to give him a chunk of money and he was going to administer the courts. But a lot of it seemed to just disappear into his pockets, his own pockets, the Chief Justice pockets. Probably went to a Swiss bank account through an electronic transfer. And at that same time, here in Santa Maria and in Santa Barbara and all over California, they were closing the courts 1/2 day a week. And they said, we got to save money, we got to save money. There isn't enough money. Why wasn't there enough money? Because Ronald George apparently was stuffing it in his pockets and transferring it to an offshore bank account. Now, you're not going to hear this discussed on tonight's CBS that brings you all the news that is vital for you to know. You ain't going to hear it. You ain't going to see it. Because all the corporate television, none of them are free of debt. Every year, they have to refinance their entire operation. And if they speak out against the bank gangsters, I'm talking specifically Chase, Morgan, Rockefeller, but essentially they're all little fingers on the Rothschild octopus that strangles the world's economy. President Andrew Jackson, in his day, back in the 1830s, was famous for saying, "I killed the bank." Which bank was he talking about? He was talking about the second central bank of the United States, which was a Rothschild-funded thing. But most congressmen didn't even know that. Most people had no clue. And they would expand and contract the economy and steal people's assets by foreclosing on their businesses. Now they own pretty much all the major corporations, have controlling stock. They're probably worth something like 550 trillion with a T. But they claim they're only worth a few billion. That's nonsense. You have to look at all the corporations they control. They control the CIA, they control the FBI. Kennedy was going to keep us out of war as soon as he won re-election, so they had to kill him. He was going to issue silver dollars, and he made an order, I think it was order 11110, to issue and mint silver dollars back in 1963. And they were minted, but not while he was alive. They were minted. The order was finally carried out in 64. And then his successor, who was also a conspirator in his murder, you have to read Philip Nelson's book, The Assassination of JFK by LBJ. Philip F. Nelson, I forget the website, but if you go to my YouTube, Google it, it's there. Anyway, Dizak, I finally got him on the show, and I've been trying to get him here for 5 years. I want you to see just a little bit of what he said here just a month ago on, I think it was March 22nd, a little over a month ago. And he's coming back. The next show will shake the foundations of the California Supreme Court. Here we go. Wednesday, March the 22nd of 2017. I just wanted to remind you that after that was attorney Gary Dunlap, who used to live in a very nice house in Solvang, not far from Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch, and he got slammed with 6 or 7 felonies. And the only thing Gary Dunlap was really guilty of is having a little possession of a little marijuana in his pocket, because he did a little marijuana now. And he confessed to the misdemeanor marijuana possession. But they wanted to slam him with 7 felonies, and Attorney Funky Ballou from the county north of us came in and wiped out, blew all those 7 felonies, he was found not guilty on everything. But they had the sheriff's department. I hope you good sheriff's deputies won't hold this against me, but there were a few deputies that would stop Gary Dunlap when they knew he was rushing to meet a deadline from one courthouse to the other in Santa Barbara to represent his clients. They'd pull him over and just slow him down so he'd be late for court. Dunlap finally said, "I've had enough of Santa Barbara," and he moved to Las Vegas. And he comes back here only rarely when someone specifically says, "Gary, I got a pile of money, come defend me." That's the only time Gary Dunlap comes back here. He lives permanently now in Las Vegas. He sold his home in Solvang. So I just wanted you to see, that was the guy that was in the handcuffs. That was Slick Gardner. And he was trying to save horses. But if you go look at the story, you see on the national media, press and TV, they made him out to be this great murderer of horses, of wild horses. No, he paid to get them vaccinated, to bring them across the border. He was going to fatten them up and sell them to make some money, because Slick Gardner's parents had set up a trust that he couldn't break. And so he needed to make some more money, because Slick Gardner had expensive girlfriends and expensive habits. I think he's happily married now with 2 kids that should be about 8 or 9, 10 years old. That's what a crooked DA and some crooked sheriffs, senior sheriffs, will do. And that's a whole nother story we're going to get into someday. Right now we have Dan Dychak, and believe me, he told you the truth. I've been trying to get him up here to expose his corruption, at least for the last 5 years. And Dan would always say to me, just wait, William. I'm filing this motion, and this is going to stick it to them, and they're going to be forced to admit I was right, and then I'll come in with my victory parade showing how I won. And they never let him win. And in fact, now, I guess the clerk has got your number blocked, so you can't even call the clerk of the court.
Well, let me tell you what has happened in the last few years. I filed, all my lawsuits have merit. I didn't have a history when I was practicing of filing frivolous lawsuits. I filed meritorious lawsuits. And every time I filed them, what they did was they tried to summarily dismiss them either on procedural ground or right away. They wouldn't even let me, you know, like when you play a baseball game, they wouldn't even let me run to first base, let alone get on first base. You know, you're supposed to in a legal proceeding. The law is supposed to favor you having a trial on the merits to vindicate your rights. That's what they call the rule of law. That's what Antonin Scalia, the great justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, had just passed away. He wrote in an article in a Chicago law school article about the rule of law. It's a well-known article that the society is governed by the rule of law. So you're supposed to have everybody that have constitutional or civil rights violated have a right to go before a jury or a fair and impartial judge to vindicate their rights. What they've done with me instead is portrayed me as some wacko and some vexatious litigant. Because to vindicate my rights, unfortunately, I have to sue a lot of judges that were involved, such as judges like Ronald George. And I know another judge that's about to retire from the California Supreme Court, Justice Whittaker. She took illegal, illicit financial payments from Charles Schwab, and I'll tell you what that's based on. She's about to leave the bench. Justice Whittaker was involved with her husband, who's a doctor, in a place in San Francisco called Institute of Aging. And Charles Schwab would give big donations to the Institute of Aging, run by Catherine Whittaker's hospital, called the Institute of Aging, very well known in San Francisco. That's an illegal conflict of interest for Justice Whittaker to have been involved in the decision to illegally disbar me, because she's not supposed to have a financial conflict of interest. I found out about this. This was put on the Leslie Brody report with this rabbi journalist by the name of Simon Levi, who later on got, unfortunately, prosecuted himself and illegally monitored by the FBI. But suffice to say, she had a financial conflict of interest. Just like I found out that other judges that I've been involved with have had financial interest with Charles Schwab. So what you've had is Charles Schwab giving and his business entities giving preferential financial treatment, what I consider bribes, frankly, to affect things. And a judge, under the canons of both the federal judges and the state judges, are not supposed to have financial conflicts of interest. So what happened recently, the thing you're referring to, I have a present case that was in the Oakland federal court. And he wanted me to come on the air before I filed. He even wanted to cover it live with the cameras in San Francisco and Oakland. And
I did.
And
he wouldn't let me.
And I got assigned originally to, there was a magistrate, I asked that she not hear the case. I got assigned to a judge who's the brother of one of the Supreme Court judges. I moved for his,
That's kind
Charles
of cozy.
Breyer.
That's
Charles
kind of
Breyer.
cozy.
Charles Breyer. So he, to his credit, disqualified himself on his own motion because he looked at my lawsuit and knew everything was legit. And, you know, I then get assigned to a young judge by the name, well, she's young in terms of a judicial career, who was a former Oakland Superior Court judge, called Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers. I look up her profile and, you know, I've said to myself, well, you know, I can't move to, you know, there's some things maybe that I don't like about her, but I'm going to go with her. I file the lawsuit, I serve it on her. They bring motions to dismiss. I continue a status conference. All of a sudden, she comes out with this cockamamie ruling saying that I don't have a right to further proceedings. And she writes, this is one of the most idiotic things, and I'm going to say it right to her face when she sees this video, Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers. She says in her decision that basically judges can never be sued. In other words, if a judge violates your civil and constitutional rights, such as takes bribes, you can't sue them to set aside their decision. Now that is absurd. That's what she wrote. The U.S. Supreme Court has recognized in recent case law that a judge can be sued when they act in the absence of jurisdiction. In other words, if a judge takes bribes or has improper communications or has conflicts of interest, you can sue. She wrote in her ridiculous decision that you can never sue judges, and throughout my whole case, I found out that she had conflicts of interest. She was friends with a former state bar president, Jeffrey Breyer. She was friends with Camilla Harris, who was representing Ronald George.
Well, she's a crook.
So she did a crooked decision. And so I moved to disqualify her right before Christmas time of last year.
Of last year, you're talking about?
In December of last year, I moved to disqualify her, filed
2016.
a major motion. It took them a month or so to rule on it. They assigned it to this Judge Wilkin, Claudia Wilkin, who was the former chief judge of the Northern District of California. She's a senior judge in the Oakland Federal Court. She denied it with a page and a half, two pages. Oh, there's nothing to your allegations, which was extremely detailed. I won't bore the viewers with the details. I thought to myself, well, this is a crazy decision. Let me check out her background. I found out when I looked at her financial disclosure statements that are published by...
You mean a Form 700?
Well, it's I don't know if they
Financial
call it,
disclosure?
it's a federal disclosure form. There's a Judicial Watch based out of Washington, D.C. that, disclosed Hillary Clinton's emails. They put up a lot of her disclosure statements, financial disclosure statements. I found out, you got to remember, my case is called Dizak versus Charles Schwab. I'm alleging Charles Schwab basically gave illegal financial contributions or his entities to various people, including judges, and thereby violated my rights, and I'm entitled to damages against Charles Schwab. The case is Dizak versus Schwab. I put in Ronald George, I put in Eric George, I put in Alan Rothberg, all sorts, and I basically said they interfered with previous litigation, tortiously interfered. It was a very strongly drafted lawsuit. I find out that Claudia Wilkin, when I look at some of her financial disclosure statements, has about 40% or so, 35 to 40% of her financial portfolio with Charles Schwab, which means, in no uncertain terms, under the standards of conduct for a federal district judge or any federal judge, including the judge that's about to be hopefully appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, including Justice Roberts of the U.S. Supreme Court, they cannot have a financial conflict of interest. So, I appealed it because I didn't know it at the time. I had no choice. It's now in front of the appellate court of the Ninth Circuit. They won't rule. I asked for a fee waiver because it's expensive. I can qualify right now in my situation. They won't rule on it. But what I found out about Claudia Wilkin is that I look at it as bribes and financial conflicts of interest at a minimum. I went ahead and sent in an ethics complaint against Claudia Wilkin to the clerk of the Ninth Circuit. Her name is Molly Dwyer, and they're based in San Francisco. You send in original plus 4 copies. They won't file it. Sidney Thomas, who's now the chief judge of the Ninth Circuit, who's based in Billings, Montana, he won't tell the clerk to file it. In my world, I'm sure in William's world, that's obstruction of justice.
I would think so. I think, isn't it the clerk's job? When a clerk receives a document, isn't that their specific job to file stamp it and file it?
Right. And there's even a case, which I cited in a recent letter to President Donald Trump.
You could sue the clerk.
Okay, well, there's a case I cited in my recent letter called Holt versus Virginia.
Holt versus Virginia.
Now, this was a case based out where the Supreme Court of the United States unanimously held, now you're talking 9 judges, that a person who is defending or prosecuting a case has a right to file documents and pleadings and writings to advance or defend his or her case. Unanimous decision of the U.S. Supreme Court back in, I think, 1965. I quoted it in my letter to Donald Trump recently. The point is, when a clerk of a court, of a federal court especially, federal clerks are supposed to uphold the U.S. Constitution, the Due Process Clause under the 14th Amendment.
I think they take an oath to do that.
They take an oath to do it. She won't file it. And you were looking at a letter that I just sent to Mr. Trump and President Trump and others.
Let's show this letter. Here's the front page. Daniel D. Dizak, Marina Del Rey, and he's addressing to Donald Trump, President, White House, Honorable John Roberts, Chief Justice, FBI Director James Comey, Honorable Sidney R. Thomas, Chief Judge, Jeffrey Sessions, Esquire, Attorney General of the United States, and Molly C. Dwyer, Clerk of the
Dwyer.
Dwyer,
I want to
Clerk
mention
of the Ninth District. That's all on the front page.
I also CC'd that letter to Don McGaff, who's the White House counsel, Stephen Bannon, who, as you know, is with Breitbart News, who's now the chief White House strategist, Senator Grassley, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee,
that page.
and Senator Feinstein, senior senator of California. And I want to mention on this broadcast to all those people like Ronald George that will probably watch this, I've been in active communication with the Trump administration and people like Senator Grassley's staff about the corruption of the California and federal judiciary.
You heard it here. On page 2, you see on page 2 of this document that Mr. Dijak just mailed off yesterday, he states, the clerk of the 9th District Court of Appeals has apparently not filed my good faith and legitimate ethics complaint against Oakland, California federal judge Claudia Wilken. This was submitted and then resubmitted some time ago by the undersigned. Among the allegations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Next paragraph, he addresses Chief Judge Thomas. You are condoning, satisfying, and otherwise consenting to illegal criminal actions by the clerk of the 9th Circuit, Molly Dyer. Said clerk, in not filing the ethics complaint against Judge Wilken, is committing an act of obstruction of justice, pure and simple. People, this is why Donald Trump should appoint a special panel to start indicting federal judges. And it's why I've quoted Anthony Scalia over and over. This is where you people need to get involved. We, the people, need to get involved and form a grand jury under that case, U.S. versus Williams in 1992, where Scalia wrote for the majority, and the citation is 504 U.S. 36. I don't have to read it off a teleprompter. It's burned in my brain. And Scalia says, we the people stand as an independent fixture, like a fourth branch of government, when the first three are so corrupt. And it's up to us to form that grand jury. And when we do, when we the people, not appointed by any judge, not led by the nose by any district attorney or U.S. prosecutor, when we the people form that, Scalia writes, don't take my word for it, please go read it yourself. Just Google 504 U.S. 36. Scalia wrote, and this is really important, they can indict even a judge, a justice, anyone in the other three branches of government. They can issue a true bill of indictment based on evidence or their personal knowledge. This sets the grand jury as the fix-it-all mechanism of all fix-it mechanisms. When the courts are this corrupt, and they are corrupt with no redeeming grace. You know, they used to have this pornography ruling where they said there's some social redeeming value in some amount of pornography. There is no redeeming value in a corrupt court system.
I want to point out a famous statement that Earl Warren used to say, the Chief Justice. The reason why he knew about corruption, my friend just found out that I'm with today, he found out that Earl Warren's father was unfortunately murdered, and maybe that was his incentive to become a district attorney. He was the district attorney of San Francisco when Melvin Belli was practicing in that great city. And he ended up then he was appointed to being the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. And you know what he used to start every conference with when they would take a vote on which cases to accept and how to rule? Apparently, this is what I read, he would start the conference, because he started off because he was the Chief Justice. Is it fair? He'd look at every case. The first thing would say, is it fair? For example, remember when Muhammad Ali stood up for his rights that he was conscientiously objecting to the Vietnam War. Is it fair? So here I am. Before I went to the William here and exercised my First Amendment rights and due process rights, freedom of expression, here I am trying in the court system to do it properly for years. Practiced law for years as an advocate, was respectful for years to judges and to adversaries and to all these people. And here I can't even file a document like an ethics complaint, a valid ethics complaint, against a crooked federal judge who upon information and belief took bribes from Charles Schwab or his related entities, or has at a bare minimum financial conflicts of interest. Now under the federal authority, which is in a statute called 28 U.S.C. 455, a federal judge cannot have financial conflicts of interest. And to disqualify a judge, it's not about just an actual conflict, it's an appearance of a conflict.
That's right. You can't even have, the actual statute says you're not allowed to even have the appearance of a conflict. And we're way past appearance. We're blatant, in your face, got a conflict of interest.
And I'm going to tell you something.
Run all the pages of this letter to Donald Trump, which today's the 22nd. This was just mailed yesterday. Donald, I hope you pay attention and look at this letter. It's in the mail. You should have it. Your staff should have it before Friday.
And you know, I point out in the letter.
Yeah, go through all the pages of this letter.
That I've been illegally monitored by a rogue FBI agent. I've been wiretapped yesterday. As I've been talking to William, I believe in good faith that I've been wiretapped when I've talked to him and others. Several times I've had people's calls interrupted. I've had and now, to add insult and injury, when I'm talking about that ethics complaint against that federal judge, they block, if I call up my regular cell phone number, which is on this letterhead, if I call them, you know what it says when I call the number? Invalid number. They block my number to the Ninth Circuit general number to the clerk's office without due process, without notice. In other words, if they think why we shouldn't block you from calling our clerks because you're upsetting them, because you're saying that judges on that court are taking bribes or having improper financial conflicts of interest, you're saying that your documents don't get filed. I've had numerous pleadings that they won't file. In my world, that's obstruction of justice. I'm sure in William's world, that's obstruction of justice. That's unconstitutional. There's a Civil Rights Act for a reason. We're allowed as citizens of this country or as people living here legally, we're allowed to vindicate our rights in the federal court system. When a state actor such as Ronald George takes away my license to practice law illegally, I'm allowed to go in front of a federal judge on the Civil Rights Act and other remedies and pursue my remedies. I'm allowed to have a trial on the merits. This is absurd. Just like, you know, the due process, and you might have noticed that President Trump recently at a press conference about 2 weeks ago said there were a lot of problems with the Ninth Circuit, referring to the executive order that they wouldn't let come in. And he had probably by that point received my various I've written several letters to him. Now, I'm not saying he himself read it, but I'm sure somebody on his staff, like his White House counsel, have told him about it. And certainly, this should be of concern to the President of the United States that I don't expect him to write me a direct letter back, but what I want him to do, and what I want Jeffrey Sessions to do, and other people like that, and FBI Director Comey, I want them to carry out a criminal investigation why the clerk of the Ninth Circuit is not filing my documents. That's a criminal act. I want them to do an inquiry why several judges of the Ninth Circuit and other federal judges below them are, like this Judge Wilkins of Oakland, are taking bribes or having illegal financial incentives from Charles Schwab or his entities. I've got a list in that letter of various Ninth Circuit judges that I have done research on that have financial conflicts of interest with Charles Schwab. They're listed in there. There's former Chief Judge of the Ninth Circuit, Alex Kaczynski, Kim McLean Wardlaw. I want to name you watching this. Mylan D. Smith, based out of Los Angeles. Ronald M. Gould, M. Margaret McCowan, Marcia Berzon. Now, on that list, except for Judge Gould, they're all being presently sued in the Oakland case that was illegally dismissed that I appealed. And you know what they've done in my appeal? They've stalled it. They won't give me a fee waiver. And if I gave them the $505, fine. You know what they would do? They would still summarily dismiss it because it's rigged. So I intend, if necessary, to file another lawsuit. And I put right in that letter that if I have to sue the present Chief Judge of the Ninth Circuit, Sidney Thomas, I will. Here I'm telling him in repeated letters, this letter you're seeing is only one of several letters I've written. I've told him repeatedly that my documents and pleadings aren't being filed. He doesn't do anything about it. And he is the Chief Judge of the Ninth Circuit. Now, he replaced Alex Kaczynski. And I want to mention something about Alex Kaczynski, for example. He was publicly reprimanded years ago because he had a website, apparently, that had animal porn with him. And he was publicly reproved.
Was that proven? I don't know if that was actually
yes,
proven.
He had it. Well, he claimed it was his son's or somebody else's site, but he got a public reproval from it. This is the kind of person, now, that they put in charge of the Ninth Circuit for years. And what they do on civil rights cases involving pro se litigants or someone like me that they don't like, then they claim that someone that's representing themselves. Now, I've gone to numerous attorneys about representing me, and you know what they all say to me? Dan, we know you're right, but we can't represent you because we're worried about losing our bar license if we represent you. We're worried about repercussions. Then, I'm going to tell you about the mainstream media. I spoke to Leslie Stahl's assistant of 60 Minutes before she did the interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger. They listened to me for 45 minutes. You know, she said, they
And
said,
did what?
Did nothing. Now,
Exactly.
let me tell you what
45 minutes, and they did, Leslie Stahl did nothing, which is why William Wagener, this guy, continues to do the show. So when there's a whistleblower, like former bar card holder Daniel Dijak wants to blow the whistle, there's somewhere for him to go.
And I want to make it clear, I'm still fighting to get reinstated because I deserve to be reinstated. And I'm going to tell you two famous quotations that happened to me that show how the system is rigged. When I spoke to Ronald George, the one that you tried to call on his cell phone, the former Chief Justice, you know what he said to me on the phone once when I was trying to settle? Nobody cares what you have to say. That's an exact quotation from him. You know what he was basically saying to me when he said that? He was basically saying to me that I rigged the system and I talked to judges, both federal and state, and you're not going to go anywhere with your lawsuits. That's what he was in effect saying to me. Just like when Alan Rothenberg, a crooked banker, former state bar president, who's money laundering for the Georges, when he goes ahead and says that, he went, I'm going to get you. So they think because they're connected. So, you know, I figure...
Well, people, we're back live here in the studio. That was a clip from March 22nd when we did a show on Wednesday with disbarred or excommunicated from the religious mafia cult of the Bar Association, Daniel Dijak, with more than 20 years experience, graduate of 2 law schools, got a bachelor and he's got a master's in law, and they don't like him speaking truth. So he's off. I want to take a minute here to tell you about this new CD. It's available at Boo Boo's Cheap Thrills in San Luis Obispo County. It's also available at Game Exchange in Aurora Grande and On the Record in Pismo Beach. Also in Orcutt, a little town south of Santa Maria, it's available at the Paradise Trading and Record Post there, right by the CVC pharmacy, right in the corner. It's called Paradise. So if you want to get this, it's some really good songs. We were just playing a little bit in the background there for you. I like that first song today. You need something positive to bring me up in the morning because things like Willie Nelson walking off the stage, I guess in Santa Barbara Bowl last Saturday, his guitar was out of tune. And he was starting to play Whiskey River and he just walked off. And his drummer and his other musicians just kept on playing, and 10, 15 minutes later he walks back on. His guitar is completely out of tune, I am told by people that were there, but they didn't care. They just loved Willie. He's 84 years old and he's still playing. He's still going on circuit, making people happy. I mean, what more can you do in life than to make other people happy? So they didn't even care. Nobody asked for their money back. They were so thrilled to see Willie, 84 years old, still playing his good old tunes. And he didn't look like he looks today. When he started, the first clip I saw of him on TV, he looked like an FBI agent. Clean cut, crew cut, hair tight, clean shaven. But his fans loved him. So I just wanted to mention that and remind you, you can get this album today. It's got 10 songs on it, brand new, all copyrighted, never heard, but it sounds like the 60s, by John Henry Cassani today at Paradise Records in Orcutt. Also Boo Boo's and Cheap Thrills in San Luis Obispo, the Game Exchange in Aurora Grande, and On the Record in Pismo Beach. All have these for sale. I can't tell you what the price is, but they're available and they will lift your spirits. I want to bring your attention now, and we're going to get back to Mr. Dijak, to the fact that we're living in an American Nazi regime, and it's not because Trump is president. Trump just capitalized on the broiling, simmering anger of Americans, having their children kidnapped by the government with false statements, false court records, having their homes stolen with criminal Ponzi scheme running banks like Bank New York Mellon, who Cindy Brown is fighting. 10 years her identity's been stolen. And the DA of Orange County, he won't lift a finger, even though she's got a letter from Michelle Lipton, which we've shown you in the past. She's got a letter with Michelle Lipton signing this letter saying, hey, to the guy that wrote the first fraudulent mortgage note and signed her name, the letter is addressed to that guy, and it says, desist and refrain from any further activity. And he just kept on doing it. And Tony Rackauckus, the rat of Orange County, the guy that should have gone to prison with that crooked sheriff, remember Mike Corona? I called him out like 10 years ago on my TV show, on my personal Facebook, on my On Second Thought website. I said, Mike Corona's a crook. Lindy Cater's daughter couldn't have been murdered so quickly, efficiently, and brushed aside without Sheriff Mike Corona having a hand. And the big hand Corona had on Linda Cater's daughter, whose name was Andrea Nelson, being murdered and covered up in that house on Morningstar down there on the harbor, Huntington Harbor. The big hand Mike Corona had was calling the coroner's office, which is privately operated by people. The head coroner wasn't even born in America. I mean, it's what's happening to our services. We can't find any Americans that can serve as coroner. We have to hire people born in foreign countries. A lot of things are really, really wrong, but that's an aside. He calls the coroner 3 times. I asked the coroner. I personally asked that coroner, how often does the sheriff of Orange County, California, usually call in when you've got a murder? He says, maybe 1 time, maybe once. What was different about this? He called a 2nd time, and he called a 3rd time, and he was insisting that they list it as an accidental overdose of cocaine. Oh, wait a minute. Mike Corona, I want you to come on the show and deny that. I want you to come on my show and deny that. I want to give you equal time. While we still have freedom of speech, while we still have freedom of press, which is rapidly disappearing. You saw the glitches we had on the show today. When a government show, the city council meeting or something goes on the air, there's no glitches. It goes on just fine. But when we do public access and I touch on these bank gangsters and these issues that really affect people, somehow we have glitches. And then they want us to raise over $8,000 to Wi-Fi what we do here. Well, for years they've been telling us they couldn't spare the bandwidth, blah, 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 on and on. Anyway, Tony Rackauckus puts out this nice, slick little magazine and trying to make himself look like the good guy. Here's Tony Rackauckus right here. Right here. This is him. This is what I call the rat, or the Don of Orange County, the Mafia Don, right here. This guy right here. Tony Rackauckus. And I was there on the day they had the Victims' Rights March, and there were people holding placards all around him saying, Tony's a rat, Tony's a bad person. He allowed the murder of my child. What's this slick magazine he put out? I just, there's some nice DAs in there, some people who are trying to do good work, but you can't do good work when you're working for the devil himself. I mean, you can't do God's work when you're working for the devil. Here's a page. This is homicide victims in 2013, 2014, and right here in the bottom, right here, this guy with a cowboy hat, that's Kelly Thomas. He wasn't a victim of some mobster, some ludicrous bandit methodically going around robbing and killing. Here's Kelly Thomas right here. He was a victim of 2 city cops from a city which is to this day not apologized to the father and mother of Kelly Thomas. He was murdered by cops, literally beat down and crushed till he couldn't breathe. And you can see the video. It's on my, put in Kelly Thomas, it's on my YouTube channel. Just pull it up. You can hear him say, I can't breathe, and they're crushing him. Why? Because he was running away. Because you saw this criminal wearing a cop's uniform, because he was a city cop in that city in Orange County. I get upset when I even think about it. These 2 city cops, one was named Cincinnati, but the other guy had a Spanish name. And you can see this happened at a bus stop in Fullerton, in the city of Fullerton. And they didn't, apparently the cops forgot they were on surveillance tape. They wrote up a false report, and then when they got the word, oh, there's a surveillance tape, then they had to get the report, had to shred the original report and write up another report, because the report was felonious. And the chief of police had to leave Fullerton, and the city council of Fullerton just covered it all up. But there was a wrongful death lawsuit, and they paid out the mom $1 million in a settlement, because mom and dad had been divorced, and maybe that was part of Kelly Thomas, who did have issues that made him homeless. He had 2 homes to go to. But God rest in peace, Kelly Thomas. The man did have some issues. But this one cop, he puts on rubber gloves. See these 2 fists? I'm going to F you up. Now, when a cop says, I'm going to F you up, he doesn't say, put your hands behind your back, I'm taking you into custody. I'm going to F you up. That's why I'm putting on these gloves, because I'm going to smash your face. He's no longer performing as a cop. He's now performing as a thug in uniform. And let it be known, Fullerton, California hires thugs. They like to hire thugs, even if they got to murder homeless people who already pushed so far down on the survivability scale that they're barely making. And that's why I find it funny that they put Kelly Thomas's picture as one of the murder victims right there. The guy with but if you saw the video where his face is all bloodied, his eyes are swollen shut, he never recovers consciousness. He dies a day or 2 later. And the ambulance comes, and what do? The ambulance treats the little minor scuffles on the knuckles that the cops that were beating and crushing him to death, that little scuffle, while his face was bludgeoned because they smashed his face into the concrete and they crushed him so he couldn't breathe. And you can hear him saying, Dad, Dad, help me, Dad. And his dad is an ex-cop. So you got 2 cops killing the son of an ex-cop. That's how bad we need.